Hello, I'm Jim Weatherby with Entrepreneur Innovation and Exchange, or EIX. And we have a wonderful interview to share with you with Dick Schulze, the founder of Best Buy. So Dick, thanks for taking time to be with us today and share some of your wisdom for people interested in succeeding as entrepreneurs.
Thanks, Jim, and good morning. It's great to be with you.
You know, most entrepreneurs signal some telltale signs early on that kind of gives people a clue. Maybe this might be an entrepreneur. Do you have any experiences in your youth growing up that, as you look back, you can think, well, there was a telltale sign?
Thanks. Obviously, for me, I didn't recognize it in that form or fashion at the time, but I had a high level of interest in attempting to earn my own money, control much of what I wanted to do. And so at age 11, I told my parents I wanted a paper route. I would accept the responsibility of morning and evening and Sunday distribution. Here in Minnesota, that was a bit ambitious. At 11, my mother said she wasn't sure that was, the best thing for me to be doing, but I said at 11, I don't know what else I can do to begin that journey. My dad told me that I needed to pay 20% of what I earned into the household. So I knew I was into a revenue sharing plan early in my career. But for literally 4 years, from age 11 until I was almost 15 years old, I peddled papers, got up in the morning at 5:30, 6 o'clock, developed a strategy, which I learned after the first year, to help enhance my earnings. I knew that Christmas time was a time for generosity, and I made it a conscious effort between Thanksgiving and Christmas to put every newspaper inside the door every day, morning, evening, and Sunday. So when it came time to collect the week before Christmas, the generosity showed itself in a meaningful way, and I was able to triple my income, and at that point in time actually able to buy a car when I was 15 years old, just based on my ability to go that extra distance at a pretty early age. So it started with a paper route. It started with formulating ways in which I could enhance my service and increase my earnings.
Now, when you say pedaling, you actually were pedaling on a bicycle.
I was in the summertime, not in the winter, but in the summer I did because I could get there faster.
Right.
And I had hills to deal with. And my mother and my dad actually both, would put the Sunday paper in the trunk of the car when it was below zero, and I'd run back and forth from the car to the different houses that I was servicing. And that's how I got things done on time and with some assistance.
So that extra effort to put the newspaper behind the door, that was under extreme temperature conditions.
It was because it was obviously Christmas time.
Right.
But generosity poured forth, and earnings tripled, and I felt real good about it. My dad did too, because he stood up for his 20%. And what could I say? That was the revenue sharing plan, and I paid into the household at an early age.
Well, another perspective on that is that you were taking initiative for the customer in the hopes that it would get a return.
Amen.
Which is kind of unusual for a youth today. Give me something first, and then I'll think about it.
Yeah, well, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. But it worked out well for me, and it taught me. The customer service was pretty important, and the people would pay a little extra, if they got a little extra service in return. So, that sunk in, and so that was maybe a first step. When I got into high school, I sorted packages after school for one of the large national chains. So I knew that if I was going to essentially support myself, which my dad and mom said by the time I got to high school I should be in a position to start doing pretty well. I worked hourly, sorting packages at night after school, and then I'd get home and do my homework. And it was usually midnight before I got to bed, and got up in the morning, hitchhiked to school. I lived about 4.5, 5 miles from school. So, it was a case of, get up out early and get your thumb in the air. And I know that doesn't happen anymore today. For obvious reasons, security being one of them. But it taught me a lot about responsibility and accountability. And then through the course of time, I worked at a supermarket. I was a stock boy at a supermarket in St. Paul, not too far from where I lived. And I was always thinking about ways in which, you know, we could improve what we did at the store. And we had an assistant manager that had asked me to arrange the loading and unloading of product and stock that, you know, groceries that came in every day from the distribution center. And I would chase all over the store, putting things from the distribution cart into different aisles. And one day I, you know, had a conversation with the assistant manager. I said, you know, burning up an awful lot of time here, carrying an awful lot of cans and an awful lot of packages into different aisles. Don't you think we could organize the incoming products in a fashion that allowed me to stay in the same aisle? So, you know, once it came off the truck and got on the cart, it went in an aisle. I could put that stuff away pretty quickly because I'm just in one aisle rather than back and forth. And I was told, you know, listen, don't try to rearrange our process and our system. We've been doing this a long time, and it's always worked for us. So just do your job. You know, and so I backed off and continued to be pretty sporadic in the way I was distributing the groceries throughout the store, until finally I encountered him, you know, the second time, and I said, you know, with all due respect, I know this has been something we've done here, but this just isn't working, and I think we can do it a whole lot better. And he said, well, I told you, young man, that, you know, we're happy with the way things are, and we don't want to disrupt or change our process. And I said, well, if what you're telling me is you don't want to try it, then I guess maybe I'm in the wrong job. And he said, well, maybe you are. And so I said, well, with that as a background, here's my apron, and I'm moving on.
Well, that actually sets up the next question is, at some point, you make a decision that you want to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. And a lot of people actually become entrepreneurs because they want to be their own boss. They realize, I'm working for someone who's not allowing me to improve things and make good decisions. Did that have something, that type of experience have something to do with leading to that?
You know, it really did, and it followed me in the way I acted and behaved, you know, going forward, probably with the exception of my military service, where everything was by the numbers, prearranged by the government, and you know, the Air Force, you know, did things a certain way, and I needed to conform to that, and I did, and the disciplines were great. I made some good friends, you know, while I was in the service, but when it came to the world in which I could make a difference, and I honestly believed I added value, for me it was really a case of acting on it, right. And not being afraid to take the action that I thought was in the best interest of first and foremost myself, but also my family. You know, as my career unfolded, I even reached a point in my career where, after being the major revenue producer in the firm at which I worked when I came out of the service, and not getting the kind of response that I felt was appropriate for the contribution I was making, I finally said I'm a whole lot better off taking control of my own destiny. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny, obviously, and I felt I could do that in the framework of a company, you know, who would come to appreciate what value I added and what economic contribution I made. When that didn't happen, that's when I said, well, gee, now I'm married, you know, now I have a family. I need to be a little bit more aggressive in the way in which I pursued those opportunities. So I resigned from the family business, much to the shock of my mother and the disappointment over time of my father. But the net result was I needed to control my destiny. And that's when I broke away and started our first retail initiative, which was at that time Sound of Music, where we focused our energies around selling component audio products to young males, 18 to 25 years old, who loved music, loved it clear, loved it clean, loved it loud. And I was going to find a way for us to start a company and grow in a niche. And that niche has obviously blossomed into what is today Best Buy. Yeah. And it's because we listened carefully to customers and weren't afraid to make changes.
Well, it sounds like there was some defining moments there. One was you actually had a sense of P&L, profit and loss, from having a paper route. Because you bought your papers and you had a margin you had to live with, and you had to give 20% to the family budget. And then you had a boss who wouldn't listen to you, and that would be frustrating to someone who has good ideas and they're not not being received. And in other words, you had that experience of understanding the value that you were adding, but not being really rewarded for it, and realizing, as a lot of people say, if you want to really be financially rewarded, you will have to go into business for yourself or somehow be sharing in the profits, as opposed to just being a paid employee. Those seem to be defining moments. Can you give us a little time history then of your own businesses as you started then with the Sound of Music?
Well, you mean the evolution of change?
Started with one store and
Yeah, I started with one store in St. Paul, and because I had been a manufacturer's representative, I was pretty thoroughly versed and connected to many of the competitors in the marketplace at that time. And I understood and knew that at least two of them were struggling, one financially and one physically. And because I had long-standing relationships with manufacturers, I was able to approach these two retailers and talk to them about the possibility of acquiring them. And because I didn't have any money, literally had to leverage relationships to try to make that happen. And because I was trusted by the suppliers whose products I represented, I worked out arrangements with the two retailers in question to acquire their companies within the first 90 days we were in business. And only on the premise that the manufacturers would give me extended credit arrangements, and the promise from me that I would work on paying off what was due and owed by those two competitors over time.
How old were you at that time?
26.
Okay.
I was 26.
So you did a pretty good job building some credibility, but you had some relationships.
Absolutely.
You know, they say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you did have your network at that point at a very young age.
I did, and I was grateful for their confidence and trust. So within the first 90 days, we opened in August. By Christmas, we had 3 stores. Our own that we began in St. Paul in a unique little corner that was surrounded by 4 private colleges. And so we had that young male audience, you know, that we were focusing on in the framework of these 4 colleges that were within a couple miles of our store. And then we acquired the campus store at the University of Minnesota, and we acquired the downtown Minneapolis store.
I know how you got the credit for inventory. How are you getting credit for all these buildings to set up stores?
Well, you know, the stores came with the company, so in the form of the campus, very hard to find little niche right in Dinkytown by the University of Minnesota campus. And then downtown Minneapolis, these 2 competitors already had leases, already had locations. I met with the landlords and kind of worked out the framework of how I was going to pay the rent, which obviously hadn't been paid. So these 2 companies were struggling, and so essentially was able to leverage cash flow and openly made people aware of the fact that I was probably going to take some money from Peter and give it to Paul. But rest assured, Paul would step up and then I'd pay Peter. So it was basically an ability to balance the cash flow that was coming off these 3 different business locations. And then you know, we worked closely with the team in the field about how important it was to generate revenue, service customers, and create the kind of cash flow to meet our obligations. And for me, it was always important, if I was going to maintain credibility over time, I needed to walk the talk. So if I made a commitment, I needed to act on that commitment. And I needed to do whatever it was that was in front of us at the time to make that happen. And so Sound of Music grew, you know, over 12 to 15 years, focusing on selling audio component products to young customers, both male and female, but candidly mostly male. And then the light went on, you know, that basically said, wow, you know, we've been kind of doing this for a long time, making a little bit of money, treating our people well, servicing our customers. But we weren't growing top line like we needed to grow. We weren't expanding, you know, where it was an opportunity. And that's when I bumped heads with Mr. Landris, Zeke Landris, who was over time a long-standing regional retailer in Virginia. And he came to me with ideas on how to get outside the box we were in and think about our business more broadly. And in doing that, we focused on couples, married people, female consumers, took on video products, ultimately added software, did music and movies. So we stimulated more traffic, and the business got a whole lot more successful. And it led to further expansion of our business when we went from Sound of Music to Best Buy.
It sounds like Landers, or Zeke Landers, was a mentor.
He was.
Was
Absolutely.
that important to have a mentor
Oh,
at a young
man.
age like that?
Jim, I can't say enough about how important it is to have somebody that's been there, done that, and can give you some reference and some inspiration and guidance about the decision making you make, and can help define the opportunities that are out there for you. And I learned an awful lot about how to diversify product offerings, how to attract to different demographics, and make the store environment much more exciting. And I thank Zeke for that, because he opened the door to a lot of different things we could sell.
Okay. Well, could we talk a little bit about some defining moments along the journey once you're on the Sound of Music, Best Buy trajectory? The tornado, I know, was one that seemed to really
Well,
not just be a disaster, but be a learning experience.
Well, it was, Jim, and thanks for bringing that up, because, you know, sometimes ideas for new ways to think about business come from activities or occurrences, you know, that change the shape of your thinking. And when we lost our Roseville store, which was our single largest volume and our most profitable store in the chain, and we turned what was a disaster, you know, from the store. Fortunately, no lives lost, but major damage. We quickly assembled a team of our employees together to help us organize tents and major tornado sale. It was like a warehouse sale, outdoors under a tent, offering to people products that were damaged in the tornado at sacrificial prices, because we were able to negotiate the right kind of terms and conditions with our insurance companies. And lo and behold, by the time we got to the weekend, you know, we had spawned this huge tornado sale, and we shut down traffic in the city of St. Paul, clogged freeways of people coming in to take advantage of these extraordinary offerings. And we had all of our employees literally that we could free up from all of our other stores, you know, working this tent and managing the sales process. We had a trailer brought in to process credit. You know, we had wives and children of families coming in, helping out, moving boxes around and getting things replenished. And we were selling product to the walls. And I'm looking at all this, and I'm saying to myself, wow, these people are here for a real opportunity. Here's a tornado sale, here's open box, damage, some wet boxes, and real value. And people were streaming from everywhere for it. So we had this huge sale, very successful. And I got to thinking, you know, as I looked at this, I said, gee, if we could just package this whole occurrence and this whole incidence and this whole opportunity into a form of a new store, think what we could do. And so that spun the idea for Best Buy. You know, I said, let's get the customer in control. Let's create added value in this process. Let's stack it high and let it fly.
All right.
And so it was coincidentally at a time when wholesale clubs were coming on the scene. Price Company, Sam's Club, Costco, you know, were all being born about that same time. And so people were gravitating towards where the value was. And I said, I can't imagine why we can't make this work for electronics. So Best Buy came on the scene, and we began offering wonderful products at great prices with a lot of added value and sales support. And the economic difference between what we generated at Sound of Music and what we were able to generate at Best Buy was a factor of 10. So you don't miss that. And that spawned our distribution first regionally and then, of course, ultimately nationally.
Well, there's a couple of aspects of that story that are so significant. One is tornadoes aren't that common in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of curiosity about looking at the damage of the tornado. So you actually held the sale at the site of the damage
We did.
in hopes that, I guess, the morbid curiosity would bring people out to check that out.
Yeah, and they did,
Yeah.
of course.
And the other was that, of course, right after the tornado, you've got rain coming down, no roof on the store, inventory being damaged, and you're able to get, within 2 hours, every single employee from all the other stores there to help save inventory and get it to the Bloomington warehouse. What was it about the leadership? Not everybody would do that. Not everyone would show up in that circumstance?
You know, I think, Jim, thanks for the question. I think it's really a lot to do about our culture. We had a culture of inclusion, and we had a culture of empowerment. And people knew that their input was respected and listened to, maybe not always acted on, but for all intents and purposes, they had a voice.
Better than yours was at Red Owl.
Yeah, amen, amen. And that's probably where I learned, you know, that listening to new ideas was a great way to make your company stronger. So employees knew that the company was just dealt a setback, and that we had an unfortunate catastrophe that hit one of our stores. And when the cry went out, you know, we need help. We need to get this organized. We need to get it under cover. We need to get it protected. We need to figure out how best to take advantage of the opportunity if we could. And we had our employees out in force. I can remember the police department, who was cordoning off the tornado-affected area, were checking IDs to see if the people that wanted in to help were actually Best Buy employees. So even I had to show my ID, you know, as to who I was when I got there. And, you know, the Brad Andersons of the world and the Alan Lensmeyers of the world and many of our store managers, the Dave Telchels, and on and on and on. The list is extremely long of people who are rolled up their sleeves and were working into the evening hours to protect the products and make sure we could safeguard what was there.
So this really was a case of making lemonade out of a lemon, which was the tornado. But to go from an 8,000 square foot store, Sound of Music, to this big box store that you had in mind, that requires a whole other type of capitalization that you didn't really have. So that would be another challenge then?
Well, it was, and I didn't even think about it. To be really honest with you, I was more about leveraging what I believed were solid relationships with suppliers. And when I showed them the financial returns that could be made, you know, on a much stronger, higher profile selling strategy. And so I said, we're going to create a new business model. And we're convinced, based on what we saw here, that we can make this work. So what we asked for was a little more dating, bigger orders, a little more time to pay for it, and we didn't get a no. People said, well, let's try it. Let's just see if you can make it work in an enclosed day in, day out environment. So you know, they offered the support. They offered the the financial assistance in the form of expanded credit. We bought the goods and determined that this could actually be the wellspring to a strategy that could take us beyond where we've ever been. And in the very first year, Best Buy generated more revenue than the entire Sound of Music chain combined. So top line revenue from one store was way over the top. When we grand opened that store, we had people parking on streets where nobody had belonged. We had people parking on frontage roads and on side streets from freeways. And regrettably, even then, police were ticketing our customers' cars, and we were pleading with the police, give us, an opportunity at least to let these people buy what they came for. And of course, they were writing tickets, and so we were issuing credits, for the amount of the tickets, the parking tickets that they were getting. It was all kinds of things that went on in that dynamic, but it was over the top received by consumers, and so it was a hallmark of where we could go, and it was the name Best Buy. Combined with a rich assortment of differentiated products at extremely attractive prices, and the company was born.
Well, in terms of getting the suppliers lined up, there was kind of some defining moments at the Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Conference. There's the famous story of Plan A and Plan B just to make sure everyone got on board, because, I mean, you had the reputation of always paying your bills, but you were asking people to make a much larger commitment to you.
Yeah, we were, and obviously as we were moving from Sound of Music to Best Buy, we were adding an awful lot of new products. We were getting into photography, a notoriously low margin business. We were getting into appliances. Our mentor said, hey, there's a business here. You can create a niche, and we think you should be there. There was home office. There was personal computers. All of which carried low margins.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes were the call-out products that the next generation of customers were interested in buying. So what I had to do was at Las Vegas, I had to convince our traditional, tried and true, stable audio component and video manufacturers that they needed to supply the capital that I needed to buy product from other people. that was a tall sale. There were a lot of people in our company, and even those closest to me, that said, Dick, we think you're smoking something.
Yep.
We think you're not thinking clearly. You're going to go to our key suppliers and you're going to tell them that we're going to sell your product and take the proceeds and pay somebody else. I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, because we need to have access to these kinds of products. And we were able to get a small credit line from a floor plan company to help us buy some of that product, but not as much as we needed.
But you had to put your house up to mortgage that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was all in. Skin was in the game. I was betting the ranch.
But that's significant because you're 17 years in at this point from the date you started Sound of Music.
Yeah.
And 17 years in, you're having to literally bet the farm or bet the house again.
Yeah.
Of course, that convinces suppliers you're serious, but
Yeah.
that's a personal challenge. You have to really believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
in
And
order to pull it off.
fortunately for me, I had a wife, who believed in me, who knew I worked hard, for where we needed to go, knew this was all about what was best for customers, and if we didn't go there, the handwriting was on the wall in terms of how we could build this business just with 2 segments of product.
Yeah.
And ultimately,
the big there was national chains were starting, and they were buying up the moms and pops. So it really was a case of go big or go home.
exactly,
Yeah.
that's what it was. So the manufacturer said, well, this is an extraordinarily unusual request. We appreciate your honesty. Not sure we can sell it to our credit people. So you should just know we can't commit without a lot of discussion. And I said, well, here's our plan. Here's our history. And I can only tell you that if you're not there for us, our only alternative is going to be to seek some form of financial reorganization. And while I don't like to think about that, you need to understand that this is where we are. I'm asking for your support. I'm committing, that at some point you're going to get paid. It's going to be a little bit longer than what you are accustomed to, but we need to demonstrate to customers this is a fun environment. This is a store that is highly energized. It's filled with product from diverse manufacturers, keyed to a wide variety of new demographics. And if we don't make this work, candidly, we think that this is just going to narrow down to a point where none of us are going to like what comes.
So you're really offering it's going to be a win-win or it's going to be a lose-lose, and which do you want?
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So it was bet the ranch,
Yeah.
put it all in, everything's on the table, and they bought it. Even Brad and Alan and many of the others who were very close to me scratched their head and said, I can't believe this, but here's a new lease on life. And so with that as a backdrop, the credit managers said yes, and we were moving from 60-day pay to 6-month pay. I mean, they were on the line with us. So they were partners, but we had a long history of paying our bills and walking the talk. And that's what brought us over the top. So it was all about honesty, trust, passion, and the perseverance to try something new and accept change. And so with that, we broadened into concept 2. We put many more products on the shelf. We put the customer in control. We retrained our employees. We re-merchandised our strategy, and the rest is history. We doubled down on our average revenue per store. We went from 13, 14 million up to 24, 25 million. Now it approaches 40. We're the world's largest in every single factor that we operate in, with the exception of appliances. We're still only 3rd in the nation. But I buy solidly into the fact that if you're going to work hard and empower people meaningfully, set your goals high. Number 1 or number 2 is the goal. I didn't like 3 or 4 or 5. That didn't work for me. So that's where we are. And the people that brought us here are still the ones that carry the load and carry the flag and make sure that the quality work we do is number 1 in every aspect of our business.
There was a very significant change in the business model, and it kind of goes back to the tornado sale. Yeah. The normal business model for selling consumer electronics was the commission salesperson with the tie that would be in a display room, and all the real inventory was adjacent in the back. And once you made a decision, of course, a lot of that time was spent often on bait and switch tactics. And then
Well, we call it show and sell. Yeah,
they
but
would
you're
ha-
close.
they would have to go retrieve the inventory,
Yeah.
and it would take 10, 15 minutes
Yeah.
to get all of that done,
Yeah.
to get out the door.
Yeah.
But because of that tornado sale, it was just about grab and go. And so you shifted from the more intimidating commission salesperson to the iconic blue shirt that we know today.
Yeah.
And they just help you find what you want and get out the door with it.
Yeah.
And it's much quicker. I think the math on it, I understand it was a 12-step process before, and it's a 4-step process with the way Best Buy changed that model when you went to the big format store.
Right. It was a matter of how we merchandised the store, how we had the back stock out on the floor, how the customer could see we were in stock, how we had to change the displays to enhance the signing and information on the products. And the salespeople on the floor were told, you know, your job is to help explain differences in these products, explain features, what they do, what they mean, find out from customers what it is their real need is, and then match the product with the customer's need. Don't worry about profitability, don't worry about having to sell more, just get the customer what's best for the customer. And that's spawned the difference in the shopping experience. So when customers went to the traditional tried and true sales directed environment that was pre-existing everywhere, and then came here, they found the same products, they found the brands they trusted, they found the prices that were compelling, and they found that they could just help themselves. They could get their questions answered, and that we could be essentially a value add to them. So it was a 10-minute experience for all intents and purposes. In the store, find the product, get the brand, ask, have the questions answered, and run to the cashier and make your transaction, and you're out the door. So it was quick and easy.
Sure. What would you say has been the most valuable lesson or lessons that you've learned along the way?
I guess I would have to say it begins with the customer and ends with the customer. Genuinely, the customer needs to be in the crosshairs of how we think about what our business means and how to do our business. Stay focused on the customer needs at all times. Don't worry about profitability to begin with. Get what the customer wants on the floor. Integrate it into your sales policies, the procedures that you follow, and make sure the customer is the sole purpose that you make, around which you make your decisions.
And that goes all the way back to your original strategy with your paper route in hopes of getting tips to buy your car.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the customer.
Sure.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to students who are interested in being an entrepreneur, or someone who's working today thinking, I don't like my boss, I want to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you know, that's a really great question. So while I've been fortunate to have been born with a DNA that essentially said I can make a difference myself, I can have the kind of confidence to move in a direction that would be beneficial for myself and for my family, and then ultimately for multiple numbers of employees that essentially look to learn and grow. I would have to say that really not only is the entrepreneurial spirit and the empowerment of what that means a catalyst for great opportunity and success, but people who work in well-meaning and strong companies throughout this country have the opportunity to develop an entrepreneurial capability with an entrepreneurial spirit. You can make a difference wherever you are. Whether you're working in the food industry, whether you're working in the technology industry, whether you're working in the construction industry, wherever it is you happen to be working with whatever that company is, the name of the game, I believe, is that you can approach your job with a mindset that says, I can make a difference here. I see what we're doing today. I'm thinking about how we can do it better tomorrow. And instead of that assistant manager back at the grocery store when I was 15 years old saying, don't trouble me with new ways to think about how to do this. This has been, in place for a long time. The company has to respond to that kind of offering or recommendation by the employees. Employees have to be an integral part of how we make the company better. And so I would say to anybody, if you don't have the ability to start your business, a business on your own, if you don't have the kind of financing, if you don't have the kind of background, but you're working for a wonderful company, doing a job that you like to do, approach it with the mindset that you can make it better, and that you can think clearly and carefully about how better to do this. Don't just come in and say, I don't like the way I'm doing something right now, but offer up, how it is you do think you can make it better. And so if you develop this entrepreneurial capability and mindset on your job, wherever that happens to be, you can, in fact, make it better. The manager, obviously, and the company from the top on down needs to be receptive to that kind of bubbling up ways in which I can make my company stronger. If you find that it falls on deaf ears, that's the trigger.
Yeah.
That's the point in time and say, I'm so confident that I can do this in a better way. Maybe it's time for me to think about, moving in a new direction and starting my own company. And to that end, I think really is where the strength of the United States economy can really benefit, because the more new companies that get started, the more success that gets created, the more new employees that get hired, the more empowerment that takes place, the greater the culture is that gets built. The warm and fuzzy way in which rewards are cultivated at that point in time work for everybody.
Sure, sure. Well, all jobs are created by entrepreneurs. And if you want a job and you can't find one, you can always become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's how I think people should be thinking about it.
And you have a reputation for being very receptive, for bubbling up ideas. There's an old saying that if you don't like what you find at the bottom, don't be surprised by what you find at the top. And Best Buy is clearly, after Concept 2, there's been up and downs, and there's been requirements for reinventing and rethinking. And there's a lot of companies that are footnotes along the way in consumer electronics, Circuit City and Highlands, just to name a couple of them. And so that need to recognize it's going to go up and it's going to go down, but listening to those people to change the company becomes really critical.
And you're resonating with what I think is one of the most important considerations to a successful business. You need to stay, as I suggested, so close to the customer that you're in sync with the customer's needs. The best way to identify that is to go right to the contact points in your company where the customers actually are engaging your employees. And those are the employees you need to be speaking to. When I get into the field, love to have breakfast meetings with cashiers. My whole sense is the cashier is the last contact person that customer engages when they leave the store. And if they didn't find what they were looking for, if they didn't get the service they needed, if they felt the price wasn't right, if they felt the store wasn't clean, if they felt any part of the experience was not what they expected, they're going to let that cashier know when they leave the store what their experience was like. So why wouldn't I talk to the group of people that engage the customer at the final point at which they are leaving the store and they're explaining what it is they liked or didn't like or commenting about it? And that's where I get my income. I'm not as interested in how well things are moving. I'm a whole lot more interested in what are we not doing well and what can we do better. And at that point in time, I can sit down with management and say, well, here's what's going on in your store. Whether you realize it or not, this is what we're facing. Not all problems happen at the store. Many of the problems happen in the supply chain. Many of the problems happen in the advertising strategy. Many of the problems, come up in our technical service group. And so let's address these problems and let's work together to fix them. So stay close to the people that are connected to the customer, and you'll never go wrong. You'll make the changes necessary to do the right thing.
Well, there's a couple of observations watching your leadership style. I've seen you come into stores, and everyone seems to find you very accessible. There's none of this, oh my gosh, there's the founder of Best Buy. It's all they run towards you like a rock star or something, and they feel comfortable conversing. And I've also observed in your board meetings, quite frankly, if I didn't know who the founder was, I wouldn't know it by the behavior in the room, because everyone feels free to share their ideas. There's no sense of hierarchy in the room. And so that being willing to listen, I guess that lesson back in stocking the shelves at Red Owl never went away, and that lesson about learning about customers.
Well, Jim, I can honestly say I attribute that to the culture and the value of empowerment. If you genuinely are interested in what people are doing and what they have to say about what's going on, and you listen carefully to what that means, people have an affinity towards gravitating towards this kind of capability, culture, and value that they bring to the company.
Sure.
And so I always remind people, and I think they know from the videos we produce and and the information that we share, I started where they are. I was on the floor from day one, you know, engaging customers, selling products, merchandising, laying out ads. My wife and I did it on the dining room table week after week after week. I was on the floor doing the same kind of work day in, day out. And that was back when it wasn't stereo, it was monaural. Right. It wasn't transistors, it was vacuum tubes. You know, the technology has continued to evolve and engage, and it's an exciting place to be as long as you're willing to accept change and adapt to what's best for the customer.
Sure. In closing, do you have a favorite motto or quote or slogan that you carry with you at all the times?
Well, I guess I have to say I'm probably somewhat more of a type A personality. I enjoy the opportunity to make things happen and understand the importance of flexibility, empowerment, and change. And I'm pretty quick to say to people, you know, I've learned over time, if you're not the lead dog, the view never changes. and so I like fresh air, bright sky, straight ahead ways in which to re-engineer the business. And so leadership to me is extremely important. And hard work is something nobody should ever be afraid of, but working smart helps make it more effective. And that's why I think people clearly need to get as much education as they can, and they need to open themselves up to what new, different, and meaningful ways to do things, you know, come to them. So whether you're a teenager, whether you're in high school, or whether you're in college, working smart is every bit as important as working hard. And when you put those two things together and know that you're in a place where your view matters, it's a fun place to work, and you can make a difference. And you want to come to work in the morning, and you can hardly wait to get there the next morning. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Just to kind of close the loop, let's go back to the paper route. You had a young man come to your door on his paper route. Yeah. And speaking of the value of an education, could you just share quickly how that gentleman got a free education by taking a little advice?
That was a great moment. Obviously, we talked about the paper route and my little foray into my Thanksgiving to Christmas added service. I'm home on a Saturday. My wife is out shopping with our kids. It's getting close to Christmas, and so I'm doing some work at home. The doorbell rings, and so I go to the door, and it's winter, so it's like below zero, really cold. He's standing there, and I open the door, and this young man says, collecting. And I looked at him and I says, collecting for what? He said, for the paper. And I said, well, what paper? and he kind of stammered a little bit, and he said, well, the paper. And I said, well, young man, we take two papers. Which paper are you collecting for? and he said, well, the St. Paul paper. And I said, okay. I said, well, how much do I owe you? And so he starts thumbing through his little book of coupons, and he doesn't know how much I owe. And I said, well, what's your name? And he says, well, Chris. I said, well, Chris, come on in a minute. It's kind of cold outside. Let's figure out how much I really owe you. Open the door. Chris comes in, and so I said, you know, I was a paper boy once, and I had some experiences as a paper boy that were really pretty helpful for me. One of which is that you really need to know your customers, who you're delivering the papers to, which papers are you delivering, and how much they owe. And I said, let me just share with you what I did when I was your age delivering papers and what it meant to me. So I took Chris through a little chart of accounts where we had the names of every customer that I was peddling papers to at the time. And morning or evening or Sunday, I knew it. I knew who the customers were. And I took them through my story about Thanksgiving to Christmas and my $300 and how I bought my car. So it turned out to be about a 30 to 40 minute stop for Chris. But I then paid him what I owed him. I gave him a little extra tip, for what I knew was a cold day to be collecting. And so the story moved on I bet it was at least 8 to 10 years later, and my wife and I were at a fundraiser for a local community agency that we were supporting philanthropically. And a gentleman came to me, close to my age, or a little bit older, and he said, Mr. Schulze, you don't know me, but I'm a big fan of yours. And I said, oh, well, why is that? And he said, well, you may not remember this, but my son was a paper boy back in the days when you lived in West St. Paul. And he collected for the paper one day, knocked on the door, and you took him in and helped him think about how he needs to organize his route. And I want you to know that meant so much to my wife and I that we went out and bought stock in your company for our son. Our feeling was anybody that took the time to help our son understand how better to do his job was the kind of leader that we felt would be really successful in business. And so we bought stock in your company. And I'm proud to say that we made $34,000 on that investment and sent Chris to college. And he got his college education paid for because of that one move. So I just want to thank you for the time you took and the motivation that we had. And that was real gratifying for me. But I think that's a little form of giving back that
Sure
probably matters wherever it happens. And so it was fun for me.
Well, and you have given back so much and to support education, and certainly you gave a lot to that young man. Yeah. And you've given a lot to EIX today because lots of students will get to view this video and learn the lessons that Dick has provided. So a special thanks to you for your time today.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Regards.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
This is what the EIX library is all about, just so you can learn from other people's experiences. A good thing in life is to try to learn from other people's success as well as their mistakes. That way you don't have to make them all for yourself. Signing off from EIX, Jim Weatherby.